Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm your host and head witch, Miss Solaris BlueRaven, at the helm this evening. I want to give a shout out to every Revolution Radio staff, producers, listeners, chat room, and thank everybody for tuning in tonight. And we are 100% listener supported, so if you like what you're hearing, please click on the donate button. We appreciate your support and thank you for any contribution you can make to this excellent station. And you are listening to Studio A. And my special guest this evening is Russ Tanner. And Russ Tanner is founder and president of Herb Allure, Incorporated, a company that publishes scientific research about herbs, nutritional supplements, and essential oils. He's also founder of the Global Skywatch website, which raises awareness about the many dangers of geoengineering. Russ has suffered and recovered from mercury toxicity and educates others on how to do the same. He has been interviewed on numerous radio and internet programs and has published articles and given lectures on the dangers of amalgam fillings, mercury toxicity, geoengineering-related illnesses, and geopolitics. His websites are globalskywatch.com and herbalallure.com. And please welcome Russ to the show this evening. Hi, Russ.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. It's great to be here.
It's great to hear your voice, and it's always a pleasure to have you back on the show.
Oh, it's great to be here. I love what you're doing. Thank you so much.
And likewise, I love what you're doing too. I applaud you for all the hard work and hours you put into this awakening for people to understand what's really going on with our atmosphere. So thank you very much for all you do. It's greatly appreciated.
Well, right back at you. It's very important work that we're all doing. And without radio shows like yours, mainstream media would only be lying to people and nobody would hear what's really going on.
I so agree with you. You know, what's really interesting is to see this saturation of the chemtrails in the atmosphere. Things are getting worse. Obviously, the planet's going through a major transition, and yet still, you know, there's silence in mainstream, as you were just saying. And once again, you know, let's fill everybody in. Obviously, we have an educated audience, so they pretty much know what's going on with chemtrails. But for those who don't understand the chemtrail process, why don't you kind of give us a quick rundown?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, the lines that people look up and see in the sky coming out of jets, the engines that are on those jets are called high bypass turbofans, and they do not produce trails. This is why, for us who have been around a little longer and have watched the sky, which I have all my life, we've never seen trails come out of jet engines before. Suddenly, I saw this happen in 2005 for the first time. They started crisscrossing the sky and saturating the sky, and I immediately knew something was wrong because I know that high bypass turbofans don't produce trails, with very rare exceptions, very rare exceptions. So if you look up and you see trails coming out of engines, those are aerosols. They are not water vapor. And the amazing thing that we're all facing right now is mainstream media, meteorologists, many atmospheric scientists are all trying to convince the public that this is water vapors. For some reason, all the engines suddenly produced all this water vapor we see crisscrossing the sky, when people who are old enough, like me, to have watched the sky all my life know that this has never been there before. Mm-hmm. So that's what this is all about. And for someone like me, I'm very sensitive. I taste and smell it, and I have an inflammatory reaction to it. So for me, this is a daily thing that I live with, that I have no choice but to remember every moment of my life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I can certainly tell the difference between regular condensation and chemtrail, you know, things that have little, miniature particles. Of course, it does affect your lungs. I mean, it affects my lungs. I can certainly tell. I've mentioned this before. If I'm out running or something, I can tell before and after. And that's all about chemtrail activity. It's more like a pressurization. I mean, you could feel it almost sucking the oxygen out of the air, in my opinion. I don't know what your impression is, but I do feel that it has taken its hold on our environment insofar as trees, obviously animals, plants, oceans. So literally, we're talking about, if things don't change and we don't turn this around and stop these guys from doing this, it tells me that we're heading towards an extinction process here. What do you think?
We are. We're going through an event right now on this planet that is pretty much unprecedented. And people had better wake up real soon. We have people who are in charge of working under the Forest Service as contractors who are reporting that 30% of the trees under their jurisdiction are dying in some of these areas. I've collected rainwater and other type of samples, soil samples, snow samples, dust samples. In the rainwater, the tests are ranging anywhere from 3 to 4 times above the amount of aluminum allowed in drinking water that the EPA allows in drinking water. So we have, in a test I did in Bangor, Maine, we have 6 times the amount of aluminum in the rainwater than the EPA allows in drinking water, and that goes way up to several hundred times the amount in some other areas that are being sprayed even more heavily. So we are undergoing an acidification of the soils, the destruction of plant life, a contamination of human life. And of course, the aluminum particulates that are being sprayed are showing up everywhere in dust samples. They're on cars. They're in the soil, in the rainwater. They're in human bodies. I know athletes who are showing increased cadmium, lead, barium, and aluminum levels in their blood. They have no idea where all of this stuff is coming from, and they're finally opening their eyes and realizing that they're actually breathing it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. There's no way of escaping it, actually. So how would one try to detox from these chemicals if there is a decent process we can even try to do?
Well, there's a lot that you can do. I mean, the body has a way of getting rid of these types of things. Things like glutathione is the body's natural way of getting rid of a lot of the toxic metals. Mm-hmm. Your body naturally produces glutathione, but you can help it produce more by taking certain supplements like N-acetylcysteine. You can also take reduced glutathione supplements. You can take things to help move aluminum. Like two of the most effective things to get aluminum out of the body are malic acid and vitamin C. Mm-hmm. So I take large doses of vitamin C and I take malic acid every day. You can also get a lot of malic acid from apples, for instance. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot you can do. You can take algin. Algin is very popular for removing all kinds of toxic metals, from helping to remove them from the body, making sure the body gets rid of them effectively. So there's a lot that can do. I mean, detox is a big subject, and it's mm-hmm. never been more pertinent than it is today. But that's just a little sampling of some of the things that you can do.
Right. Yeah. And so far as taking a measurement, if people have been contaminated or not, or if they want to even do a check, would it be the blood and the hair that we're looking at insofar as samples go? How do they do that?
Yeah, blood and hair can be used for most metals. Blood and hair are not always that effective for mercury. Usually mercury doesn't show up in the blood or hair until it's really, really, really high. So you'll be showing mercury symptoms long before it shows up in blood and hair. Nevertheless, but other metals like cadmium and aluminum and barium and strontium will show up in blood tests. So blood tests are useful for that. Mm-hmm. And hair tests too are helpful as well.
Excellent. So is there a kit they can purchase, or do they go to a certain facility to get this checked if they wanted to?
Normally, you would go to a homeopathic doctor or even a conventional doctor, but your naturopathic doctors would be usually more familiar with the process. Allopathic doctors, it's going to be a little harder to get them to either agree to it or to even have any knowledge about it. Mm-hmm. So, go to a naturopathic doctor in your area and they can set you up with a hair test. Or you can go to labs. A lot of places, some states, you can actually go to labs and have work done, have your blood drawn, and actually get the results yourself. But usually going to a naturopath, they'll guide you to getting the process done and find somebody that you can work with who will do what you want them to do. Because remember, they're working for you.
Right. Yeah, they're supposed to anyway, right? Yeah. Well, the sad thing is, you get all these people supposedly taking samples and actually measuring, and yet at the same time, we can't get anybody to budge when it comes down to changing the way they're dispersing these chemicals in the atmosphere. And to me, there obviously is an agenda, and to me, it seems like eugenics or some form of extermination. What is your take on that?
Oh, there's no question about it. I mean, you can't be a scientist, put very toxic metals into the atmosphere, which are very, very, very small particles, so small that they go right through HEPA filtration equipment. You can't do this and not expect that there's going to be a tremendous amount of damage and death. Mm-hmm. You can't. So they know from the very onset of these programs, which have been going on for quite some time, but they have increased dramatically throughout the 2000s. You can't expect that you could do something like this without causing widespread death and damage. So that has to be part of the intent. Mm-hmm. If they truly were trying to do something beneficent for the planet, well, you don't kill everything while you're trying to save everything. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There's mm-hmm. no question that there has to be. I always have a saying that the result is the intention, because they know what the results are going to be.
Right.
So, yes, they are doing this. They're profiting from it, and I believe there is an agenda, several layers of agendas.
Yeah, it's totally insane, too. Even if it's about money, in the end of ends, nobody wins. It's a lose-lose scenario.
Yeah, I think they have a very strategic plan. They have equipment to clean the soil. They have patents for cleaning the soil. For instance, a laboratory has patented a method for taking mercury out of the soil using sulfur-impregnated carbon rods. And this technology will probably be, as they contaminate the soils more and more, because if people have had their eyes open, they've probably seen throughout the early 2000s and mid 2000s, there was report after report about rising mercury in the soils, and everybody's saying, well, where is this mercury coming from? And mainstream media is blaming Chinese coal-burning power plants. Well, typically that mercury does not travel that far. It doesn't travel across the ocean. It's not going to get that far in any appreciable quantities at all. So we have to ask, where is all of this coming from? So it's interesting when you start following the money, you'll find that there are patents for equipment, for techniques, for doing remediation of all different types that probably will be brought into play. And I think that we're seeing an explosion of other industries that are also related, like mold remediation. We're also seeing weather being disturbed greatly, and so we're seeing all kinds of remediation, construction industries in that regard. We're seeing the sales of weather derivatives. So all of these things have a tremendous profit advantage for those people who are privy to what's going on. So there is a huge amount of profit that can be made. And I know that, ultimately it seems that everybody does suffer in the end, but those people who are doing this, I truly believe they think they're going to come out not only very, very profiting from all of this, but they believe that they're going to come out healthy as well.
Jeez, it's really sickening when you think about it, honestly. It's not their planet. I mean, somebody needs to kind of cue them to that.
Yeah, I know, but they have such a sense of entitlement to the planet, though. I mean, their mentality is that the power, the might makes right, so to speak, type of mentality. Said that since they have the power to do these things, then it's their right to take advantage and to profit from it. And that really is the mentality when you get into their heads. And it really is just astonishing and very selfish.
Yeah, it's really, they have too many toys, if you ask me. Need to get rid of some of those toys, take them away from their children. But yeah, how quickly would you say the planet would recover if we were to stop dispersing chemtrails today?
Well, I think it depends on what you would consider recovery. I think that a true recovery, an apparent surface recovery would probably take decades to actually see yields start increasing back in agriculture the way they are, to see health improve. But to see a true recovery, it's kind of like putting salt in the soup. How do you get everything out that you put in? How do you do this? When you have so much toxic material that you have distributed, because they're distributing tremendous amounts of toxic material. So I mean it would be at least many decades, and I'm sure the effect would probably be felt for a century from now.
Yeah, I would say so also. And with that being said too, obviously they are dispersing the nanoparticles. Is that right?
I believe that I have tested air filtration equipment, and I felt a responsibility since I can smell and taste this stuff. And I wanted to explain to people that me being able to smell and taste this, and along with many other people, I have many people come to me as well. For us who have this real sensitive sense of taste and smell, this is not something we're reaching for. It's not something that we're saying, oh, I think I detect something. It is, as I sit here and talk to you right now, it is overwhelming. It is as if you're spraying aluminum dust in my mouth, and it's so irritating that I lose sleep almost every night because it is horrible. So for someone like me who goes through this, I have felt a responsibility to test air filters. And because these particles are so small, every HEPA filter that I have tested does not remove these particulates. They remove smoke, odors, pollen, dust. They do a great job of doing that, but I've tested a number of HEPA filtration devices, very high-end consumer devices, and none of them work against these. You have to get very specialized equipment that can even begin to capture particles this small.
Now, I know you said you used to use a wet mask. Do you still do that?
I have one sitting on my desk. In fact, we've had a series of plumes. I'm living in Philadelphia right now. We've had a series of plumes come over us in the last several hours tonight. The spraying today here was horrendous. They covered the sky, and the wet mask is sitting on my desk. I was actually using it before we went live because we had a nasty plume that just came over us, and the air comes inside. People don't realize how much of the outside air comes inside. And now that I've Now that they're doing this, it has made me realize how quickly air comes inside buildings and houses.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my wet mask is sitting right here. I've used it many hours today, and I use it practically every day to protect myself. It does make a big difference.
Well, that's good, but it's unfortunate you have to even go there, and even use it.
Well, it's a revolutionary idea. I mean, your government is supposed to do everything it does is supposed to be for the benefit of people, whether the collective population of people or individual people. Mm-hmm. That is why we contract with them to do this. That's what they are. They are our contractor. Isn't it a revolutionary idea to think that they're supposed to be helping us in every way after we see the kind of destruction that has come from every direction?
Mm-hmm. Totally. It's a slow bleed and a slow death. Yeah, I've been mentioning that quite a while, for quite some time now. But yeah, it's unfortunate that this is going in this direction. And obviously you've seen an increase in chemtrails. Is that right? Or how are things where you're at right now?
Yeah, they become more and more intense. The thing that we're seeing here that's very interesting, though, is that even though they become more and more intense, I have seen 3 times now, and this is very important for people to know. I lived in Jamestown, New York in 2005 when I first saw them happen on a daily basis. And a couple years later, after 2.5 years of intense spraying, very, very intense spraying. In fact, I moved away from there because I couldn't handle it. One day, after a 4-day break, all the trails were being sprayed at higher altitudes, and they were all short rather than long persistent. And I was astonished. I said, well, there we go. They're trying to hide it from the public. They've obviously had some kind of equipment change. Well, I moved to Bangor, Maine. I actually still own my house in Jamestown, and I left quickly. My health was suffering so badly. In Bangor, Maine, I watched the spraying for several years. And then all of a sudden, overnight, the exact same thing happened. And this was like in 2010. All the jets suddenly were spraying on the same schedule. They were leaving the same odors and scents in the air that I can smell, but they suddenly were leaving short non-persistent trails, and they were spraying at higher altitudes. So that was the second time. And then I moved to Philadelphia last year, or early this year. And astonishingly, when I first moved here, every day it looked like a war zone here. Every day. And I was just amazed at how bad the whole Philadelphia area was getting sprayed. And guess what? About 2 months ago, just over 2 months ago, the same thing happened. All of a sudden, only about 6 days, maybe 7 days a month, do we see the spraying in the air at low altitudes with persistent trails. The rest of the month, all of a sudden, they're spraying at higher altitudes, leaving short trails. So it's much harder for the public to see. Mm-hmm. But don't be fooled. If you see an engine producing a trail, even if it's short, non-persistent, this is still a chemical aerosol. And I will tell you, as one of the people who can smell and taste it and who have an inflammatory reaction to it, they are still just as intense and spraying on the same schedules, even though they're short trails.
Right. And I certainly can tell the difference between condensation and a chemtrail for sure. I mean, that's the funny thing where people seem to think that it's condensation, and I don't see how they can even possibly connect the two, in my opinion. Now, obviously, there are patents for weather modification, right? So the U.S. holds patents for these.
Yeah, there are patents for weather modification. There are weather modifications all over the country. In fact, I believe I'm on another talk show weekly, and we talk about that fact that there's very little natural weather anymore. Mm-hmm. Though we have documents and I don't want people to be fooled. I mean, this is very sophisticated. How they fool people is they release documents to the public that say owning the weather by 2025, which I'm sure a lot of your audience has heard about. Mm-hmm. Well, why would you release a document to the public about a very, very secret weaponization system that you are planning on developing? Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense at all. But if you understand that that is disinformation, then it starts to make sense, because what you do when you're lying to the public is you tell them, hey, we're thinking about doing this in the future, when you're really doing it right now. Mm-hmm. And that was the purpose of that document. And the same thing is happening with the spraying, is that there are conferences going on all over the world. There's people like David Keith and other scientists who are going around saying, we're considering spraying particulates into the atmosphere to control global warming. This is what they're saying, and they're saying it in the future tense. This is a sophisticated sophisticated disinformation technique to try to convince the public that it's not happening now. And it's very effective. It's very effective, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate that people can't even tell. They can't even go outside and notice that something's going on in their atmosphere. It's crazy.
Well, I know, and the thing is, I've watched the sky all my life, and I have I've watched the sky. I took flight lessons. I have a Army airborne ranger in the family. I lived on military bases, and most of my life I spent living in the busiest airspaces in the world. I've watched the sky constantly, and I have never, and I've flown around the United States and traveled the United States. I have never seen a trail come out of a jet engine. If I had ever seen a trail come out of a jet engine, I would have thought there was a serious problem with the engine. The only exception that people will ever find, and I hope people realize this because it's a little bit more complicated than you think. There is a very small number of engines like the SPAY 512, which is used on what's called the British Aerospace, the BAC 111. This is an older aircraft that uses an old water injection type engine, which is called the SPAY 512. This does inject water into the engine, and this can produce very, very faint trails under very rare conditions at very high altitudes. But what people have seen in the atmosphere is originally when the spraying began in mass, of course, it's been going on for a long time, but through the early 2000s, we've seen these massive, very dense spray at low altitudes, very, very dense. But people have to start thinking for themselves. Helicopters flying at those same altitudes in the same layer of air also use turbine engines. They're the same kind of engines. They just don't have the ducted fan. They're connected to a rotor instead. But the combustion part of the engine in a helicopter is the same type of engine, a turbine. But do you see masses of plumes coming out of helicopters? No, because they do not produce enough water vapor. They produce a fine black soot that's barely visible, and that's all you should see coming out of a typical jet engine.
Good point. That's an excellent point being made. So do you think America's getting hit the hardest when it comes to the chemtrails?
I think it's pretty even across the board. Europe, the European countries, everywhere from France, England, Scotland, Ireland, Germany, Holland, Scandinavian countries, Norway, are all being clobbered, are just being clobbered. I know a few people in the Orient through Facebook who have showed me pictures, and it seems that perhaps Russia and China are apparently getting sprayed much less. I have seen some trails and photographs there, but they're actually harder to find. But in the United States and in Western Europe, we're all getting hit very, very hard.
That's interesting. What about the Middle East?
I have seen pictures of Middle Eastern countries, and they also have been getting hit hard, according to the pictures I've seen. And a few contacts from Facebook that I have who are over there have also witnessed that in the Middle East as well, yes.
Well, so it almost sounds like there are some investors, almost privatized investors from outside the United States that are actually using this system.
Well, absolutely. I mean, in fact, the government is controlled by interests outside the United States. I mean, we're living in a day and age when the government is controlled by industry, which is coined fascism. And so you have the meat association that controls the meat regulation industry. You have the drug industries, which control the drug regulators. You have industry controlling government to a level that is unprecedented, that we've never seen before. And they're doing such a great job, and not great as in good, but such a powerful job in a very bad way. But they're doing a very effective job of hiding this from the public. And now we have vote fraud. I mean, this was exposed years ago. We have these voting machines now that you vote for one candidate, you can have a vast majority, and it will throw the election the other direction. And the public should be up in arms about this, but unfortunately, it's not. So yeah, the interests, I believe, in the United States are controlled by the banking cartel, which is an international group that is outside the United States. They do have some interests here, but they're centralized outside the United States, and they have central banks in most of the countries of the world.
Yeah, that certainly makes a lot of sense. Well, it's just that, it's interesting because you have the chemtrails and we have all different types of sabotage, whether it's GMO or whatever it is. They're poisoning us on so many different levels. And we were talking about this off air, and we're getting hit from all different directions here. And it's complete, it's chaos in motion.
Yeah, it is. And the thing is that a lot of people are afraid to get up and do something. It's true. We're getting hit from every direction. Now, this is not a coincidence. They're wearing the public down.
Yep.
And this is the thing that I want people to realize is people, you have the power. You have the power to turn this around. You have the ability. If people in a coordinated and organized fashion stood up, organized, and coordinated their resistance towards these things every time that you have in large numbers, those who oppose you have backed down. Those who have stood up have won for the public. Those who stand up and fight for the public win, and you always do. Mm-hmm. But what happened is we're always taught things like you can't fight City Hall. Yet we can fight City Hall, and every time we stand up together, we win. Mm-hmm. And you can resist this thing. But these ideas are just there to oppress you and make you feel as if you can't. And the fluoride in the water makes you fatigued and apathetic.
Right.
And the air, the aluminum, does make you feel like you can't breathe. It can cause lung inflammation. It lowers oxygenation of the body. It can cause strokes, aneurysms, cancer. All this stuff fatigues you and wears you down. And then with the economy, now you've got to work 2 jobs to support yourself. Who has time to go out and do anything? But this is all planned this way. Mm-hmm. And you can read some of the literature of the banking cartel families who have put this information out. And you can see that they know exactly that this plan of attack would be effective against people. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing a confiscation of resources all over around the world. And this is why the attacks are coming all over, just to keep people so busy and keep their eye off the ball and to keep people so oppressed that they can't stand up in a coordinated fashion and resist as effectively. But people can, if you just have to be willing to sacrifice some other things in your life, because if you don't do it now, I don't know if you're going to have the ability to do it in the future.
I agree with you on that one. And I do believe the chemtrails affect people on a psychological level, on an emotional level. And you hit it right there when you were talking about how it affects the body and makes people tired. I mean, there's a psychological game being played out, and there are drama bubbles popping up everywhere, obviously. We have toxicity in the atmosphere due to these chemtrails. People are getting psychically drained by all the drama going on here in this country that's completely a distraction and a false flag on so many different levels. So yeah, we're getting hit pretty hard, and I do hope people start getting it together and really start standing up and being counted, because you're right. Once they start getting to that level of just being exhausted, they're going to give up.
That's right. And you know what? It feels good. It feels good when you stand up with a group of people and go out on the road and hold up signs on a busy highway. Put a bumper sticker on your car. You know how many thousands of people are going to see that over time with very little effort from you. But it feels so good to stand up and be empowered and realize that you can educate people, and a certain percentage of those people that you educate will respond to you. They will respond and they will join with you. So be encouraged and go out and do it.
Oh, absolutely. And the one thing I'd like to see is accountability. Once again, this is the word of the year, I swear. Accountability. Where is accountability to all these criminals who are doing these things, these insidious crimes, whether it's covert technological warfare or chemtrails or whatever it is that they're dispersing across the planet here? I mean, obviously, we need to get these guys, put away. There has to be accountability. And that's what I'd love to see happen, actually.
Yeah, me too. Accountability is critical because, these people who are in the very, very, very high positions, a lot of people call them the elite. But whatever you want to call them, they can do nothing. There are very, very few handful of people. They can do nothing unless all of these workers for them do what they're told to do. Mm-hmm. And when these people, like the pilots who spray, the pilots who fly the planes, the police officers who are being sprayed themselves, who are blocking access or information to that would help reveal what's going on, and all of the other people who are in a compartmentalized fashion doing something to support the spraying, even though they might not realize that they might not be directly involved. Indirectly, somehow they're covering it up, or they're doing something to block the public. Even people who are paid to spread disinformation. I have people attack me all the time online, making fun of me, threatening me. saying that I'm a troll or a shill. I'm making a lot of money, which is a joke. I lose money and lose time doing this, and my health has gone downhill, and I have to spend money to maintain my health. I do not make any money doing this. I lose money, and yet I'm attacked. And these people, if they realized that they're also breathing the same air, just because 98% of the public can't smell and taste this doesn't mean it's there, and doesn't mean it's not there, and doesn't mean it doesn't affect you. It does affect you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So these people need to be made accountable, and they will. History has shown they will. So that's a crack in the dam when these people remind these people, in a very respectable way, you are being sprayed too. You are suffering too. You're being attacked too. We're all standing on the same ground, and we're all breathing the same air. So don't try to hide. Don't participate in doing any of these horrible things to this earth and to your fellow mankind. Don't be part of it.
Mm-hmm. I so agree with you. Well, I think a lot of those trolls are paid anyways to be jerks and harass. I kind of get that vibe anyway. There's
Yeah.
Nobody could be that stupid. I mean, let's hope not, right? But, it is about situation awareness, and I think that's one of the key factors in people in general is to be paying attention. I mean, look around and see what's going on here on all different levels, especially when it comes to the atmosphere. I don't know how they cannot notice the chemtrails. I notice them all the time. I mean, I can see them at night, when I go outside and I try to look at the stars. I mean, you can actually see chemtrails. It's really pathetic.
Yeah, it is. That is one of the most amazing things I've encountered. And I've been a sky watcher all my life, and jet technology is one of my favorite things. It has been since I was a kid, and so I naturally am just drawn to the sky. And I love the sky. I love the sense of freedom of watching clouds and watching the sky. And I don't know, I'm just that kind of guy. I really love freedom, and I love the sense and the beauty of the sky. Mm-hmm. And so for me, noticing this was simple. It's hard for me. It's hard for me to look at other people who have not even noticed this and say, how can you not notice this? But nevertheless, I try to be gentle with people and say, okay, for whatever reason you haven't noticed. But you know what? There's a certain percentage of people, maybe 10% of the people out there in the public who know nothing about this. When you present it to the people, about 10% of the people initially actually say, you know what? I have seen something. I have noticed, and they respond in a very positive way. So it's almost like a numbers game, that even though we have so many people who are not noticing this on your own, and it's amazing, truly. Mm-hmm. Still, I encourage people, go out and tell everyone. Don't be shy about it. Don't feel bad about it, because I'll tell you what, if you know about this and you do nothing, then people are going to look at you after everybody knows and say, why didn't you tell us? Exactly. Why didn't you tell us? So do it now. And even if you feel a little foolish right now, a few years from now, you're going to be a hero.
Right. Yes. Present the information, present the data. That's the bottom line. But people are being poisoned. I mean, that's the bottom line. We are being saturated with toxins here, and it's a slow death and a slow kill, and something needs to change. And not even for us, but for planetary purposes. I mean, literally, we're destroying this beautiful planet, and that's inexcusable. That's a horrific crime right there.
It really is. It really is. And it's not in anybody's best interest except for a very, very few handful of people who will profit from this. But for the common man, this is destruction for all of us. Mm-hmm.
It's really, I get really annoyed when I start thinking about it, actually. And I do miss the natural cloud formations, by the way. I used to look at the stars in the skies often, even when I was growing up, and even up until adulthood. It wasn't just until, I don't know how many years it started, but it's been worse and worse over the years. I've been taking pictures over my house and watching this crazy scenery that's being manufactured right before my eyes, and it's all toxicity.
I saw it today in Philadelphia. I watched the sky. I was out running errands all the morning this morning and afternoon, and I saw them. First thing I went out this morning, and there was probably about 15 or 20 trails. This was one of the days where we see a lot of trails. Like I said, they recently changed where they're all non-persistent except maybe 6 or 8 days a month. And this was one of those 6 or 8 days where they just covered the sky. Of course, they're flying a little bit higher, and the trails are not as persistent even on days like this. But what happens is right below their flight paths, within a couple hours, it forms this strata of haze that just blocks out the sun, that gets thicker and thicker, and then it's overcast. What happened to day after day after day of clear blue sky that I remember growing up? We didn't have any of this.
Right.
We didn't have any of this. It was completely different. So when children and young people, when you're listening to this in school, they're teaching you now that these are condensation trails and this is natural. It is a lie. This is a coordinated lie. NASA is putting out complete disinformation. And the thing that makes it hard for people, and I have compassion on people because it is hard if you haven't been paying attention for a while, but I have thankfully. But if you haven't, it's hard for people to believe some things like this because they say, how could they coordinate all of this? How could NASA be coordinated with the school system, with the textbook manufacturers? Well, that's a good question. But when you realize, watch a movie called Corporation Nation, and it will teach you, it's a great introduction for people who are new to this, is that all of these are corporations and they're tied together. Your government, you can find the office of the president, you can find the U.S. court system, you can find the state of all the states, you can find the state police departments. These are all incorporated entities that are owned and controlled. And when you start understanding that a corporation is set up like a pyramid structure where you have just a small handful of people at the top who dictate everything that huge, powerful corporation does. And you understand how that works, and you understand how corporations can control corporations, and they set up pyramids of pyramids, and you start seeing that all of these huge international corporations are controlled by the Brotherhood. They're controlled by the Brotherhood of people who are controlled by the bankers through their ties, through their personal ties, through their investments, and these types of things. Then you can start saying, wow, look at the ADM, the Archer Daniels Midland is a huge agricultural corporation that practically writes the textbooks. They donate money to found it. You start drawing the lines, and over time you'll say, wow, it's all connected. It really is. It's hard to see, but when you start looking at it over a period of years, you start understanding how everything is connected with a relatively small group of people at the top.
Yeah, game of deception, bottom line. Yeah. It's right down really to fluoride in the water. I mean, all the other crap they used to put in the water and they tell you it was healthy and good for you, it's a toxin. I mean, literally, we're just lied to nonstop, and people don't know any better because they've never been told the truth for the most part.
And it's been going on for decades. It's been going on for so long.
Yeah. I'm actually grateful that I'm awakened, to a point where I actually see through the deception game. A lot of people are not. So I think that, being out here and having you on the radio obviously is really helpful to educate people and bring them up to speed if they're not already.
Well, in shows like yours, the alternative media is telling the truth. The mainstream media is owned by the corporations. You can go find out who owns what. Clear Channel bought most of the AM stations in Maine back in 2008, 2009, shortly after the spraying started happening there. Well, why was this one corporation so interested in all these AM stations? Some might say, well, it's an investment opportunity. Well, it's centralization of power because, see, the thing is that people pay thousands of dollars to advertise commercials, to buy commercial time during news broadcasts. But what you don't understand is the news broadcast itself is extremely powerful airtime to spread disinformation. And me being in the herb industry myself, me being somebody who actually has researched these and has been part of writing a volume of book research and information about how herbs and alternative sources of medicine work, scientifically proven to work. That's part of the industry that I'm in. I have seen the pharmaceutical industry counter this type of good health information in mainstream news, lying, shadow writing studies. They have doctors who don't even write these studies are credited. Doctors who don't even exist are credited with writing these studies. This is how the world really works, and people it's scary, it's difficult to wake up, but we have to grow up and realize this is the situation we face, and if it isn't corrected soon, it's going to be tougher and tougher to turn back. I
so agree with you. Well, it's all about damage control, as you were mentioning. That's what they're doing. These pharmaceuticals like to make their money, and they can't make their money if everybody's getting healed. Now, can they?
Right. We have what about cancer cures? We have DCA out of Canada. Which is a tremendous, they have 50% reduction in tumors in 2 and 3 weeks. Incredible stuff out of, University of Calgary? I can't remember. It was one of the Canadian universities up there. Wonderful work they did. What about B-17 amygdalin? And yet, the funny thing is Hollywood is tied into this. If anybody watched the Batman movie, Dark Rising? Dark Knight Rising. They actually have a segment in there with the man who played Max Headroom, and they're making fun of amygdalin. And most of the public doesn't even know what amygdalin is. Mm-hmm. But amygdalin is another name for Laetrile or vitamin B17, which is an incredibly potent selective cancer fighter. Mm-hmm. And what they're doing is that and why would they put that into a movie? Really? It makes no sense. But they actually have a part where the guy holds up a bottle of amygdalin and says, amygdalin? Really? He ridicules the guy for doing this. But when you understand that Hollywood is just a puppet of the corporations that profit from cancer, if you understand that, then what they're doing is they preemptively put that idea in the mind of the public. And this is a fascinating study to see how they do this because they're so effective. And people who don't even know what they're talking about and probably won't even remember that in the movie, go back and look at that scene and look at how they ridicule that guy for using amygdalin, which is B17. And then what'll happen is one day in the future when you get cancer and you start looking at alternatives, you may not consciously remember that scene in the movie, but subconsciously you do. Mm-hmm. And when you come across B17 or amygdalin, you're going to feel turned away from it. You're going to feel shameful because there's been an association in that movie set up. And I did hypnosis. Exactly. And I don't mean to harp on this one point. I know I got kind of in this point.
No, it's great.
But this is powerful. This is disinformation right in front of your face. So when you look at amygdalin, even if you didn't even know what they were talking about in the movie and you forgot the scene entirely, 5 and 10 years later, when it comes up because you or a loved one has cancer and you're doing research and you come across it, you're emotionally going to feel shameful when you hear it because subconsciously you still have that memory in your mind of a guy being shamed for taking it. That's what they did in that scene in the movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, why would they do that? Yeah, why would they do that? Yeah, they do that for that very reason. They want you to feel emotionally to be moved away from real information and drawn to the mainstream.
Well, you know how I feel about movies, and I used to like old classics, but I'll tell you, it's a drain on your psychic energy field. But what they're doing is they're pulling your energy into a world of fantasy. And the bottom line is it's better off to use your energy productively, train, work out, write, be creative. I mean, I'm not saying don't go watch a movie once in a blue moon, but literally you have to pull away from that because it is about mass hypnosis and influence. And if they can't get you one way, they'll bully you. That's the bottom line. I mean, one way or another, people are going to get, corralled into a situation where they're not able to find alternative healing or alternative methods, which is really shameful because, originally we all started out doing herbology and we were, doing natural remedies and things like that, and it worked just fine. Now we have all these manufactured illnesses that are just out of control, and I question all these Ebola crap. I mean, honestly, I think it's just false flag garbage. I'm not even convinced about it anymore. I mean, I'm just completely numb to the whole scenario. So don't get me started with them.
Yeah, I know. It's the same way. The thing is I've started researching government corruption in the 80s. And so I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm not saying that I'm some foremost expert, but I have put enough pieces together where you start to recognize things when they're really fishy, when there's something really truly wrong. And the thing is, that's amazing. Something like geoengineering / chemtrails, these lines we see in the sky, is that one of the things that really make it hard for people to believe it is they say, well, if they were really doing it, they'd be trying to hide it. And they're doing it right. These lines are in the sky and NASA's telling us they're normal and mainstream media is how could they how could they do this? How could they get away with it? But the thing is that what people don't understand is not only the control that they have in all of this and in the coordination between all of these different units, but when you've studied this as long as I have, you can see that the lies aren't even that good. Mm-hmm. The cover-ups and the false flags have holes in them. They have witnesses and testimony that have come out showing that there was foreknowledge, showing that even in Oklahoma City bombing, for instance, there were. Do people know who are listening to this? Probably do because you have an educated audience. But why don't our families know that they had broadcasts there showing that 3 other bombs, which were very sophisticated military-style bombs, were mounted to the pylons in the basement of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City? That was broadcast over all of the local news stations. Now that should be powerful. You can go on YouTube and look up these broadcasts. It's absolutely astonishing. But what happened? The feds come in, all of a sudden the story changes. All of a sudden it's some lone guy who's disgruntled, who parked a truck out front. The story completely changes. We have evidence to the contrary. We have expert witnesses. We have the local bomb squad guy, and this is just one example in every one of these false flags. The local bomb squad head of the local bomb squad on the local news channels talking about, we're going to find the person who did this because now we found 3 more bombs mounted to the pylons in the basement of the building. And where is this information now? Why isn't the public standing up and going, what happened? So it's amazing today that people tend to follow mainstream media because it has a feeling of credibility, but it's not. It is the most discreditable, incredible stuff we come across. It's radio shows like this where you're actually finding the truth, where we're actually talking about this. So you're right. It just drains you. So when you've been in this, when you've been in this as long as you and I have, and you start seeing the patterns, and the lies aren't even that good. And the fact that the lies are not good make them even more effective because the public thinks, well, they're not doing a very good job of lying. It seems like everybody would know. Well, guess what? A lot of people are waking up and they do know now. So don't feel like you have to follow mainstream media just because they have a story that sounds comfortable.
Exactly. Well, if I had my way, I would tell everybody to just get rid of their televisions and stop with mainstream. Just discipline yourselves and break away from it and start doing alternative research and start understanding the bigger scenery behind these illusions, because it's not in the highest good for anybody's evolution here on this planet unless we start getting it together and going in the right direction. And you know it and I know it.
I do. And it's like it's like the Wizard of Oz. This is what television is like to me, is you have a handful of people who are creating this illusion, who are creating this disinformation. And I've seen it written into movies I'm telling you that I saw on the Discovery Channel back in the early 2000s, 2 programs, and I wish I would have videotaped them, that actually claimed that the current population on Earth was 500 million. They actually said that several times, and it caught my ear because they were very adamant about it. And I'm like, where are they getting that information from? And when I watched the programming, and I wanted so badly to record those shows because I wanted to show people that these things are produced ahead of time for normalization purposes, that as the population is decreased, they're going to normalize it and say, see, this is the way it's always been. See, nothing has really changed. There's nothing to be afraid of. Don't listen to any other information but this. But those shows were never re-aired. I watched for months waiting to try to record them, and they were never re-aired. So apparently the shows were produced. They were planned to be aired probably several years later. And the depopulation plans were not going as quickly as they had hoped, because I've known that they really had to keep pushing this back because of public resistance. They had to push back their agendas. So I would love to have gotten that on tape, but somehow it got aired, and then the producers realized that, and then they pulled them. And I saw the same thing with news stories. I actually saw a news story on CNN about Oklahoma City that was incredible. It actually talked about the foreknowledge and the other bombs. It aired once, and I had my VCR ready. This was back in the days of VCRs. I had my VCR ready saying, oh, the next time they air that, I started recording CNN saying, I'm going to record that. Look at this. So my friends and my family can see that even on mainstream media, that story. And if you watch the news, they repeat stories over and over and over again throughout the day.
Entrainment.
That story was on once. It was pulled, never was shown again.
Interesting.
Yeah, so sometimes things get out through the cracks, Maybe there's someone on the inside who really wanted to get the information out, and they got it played once, and then the executive producers pulled it. Even with many of the stories with some of the corruption that has come out on some of the presidents, there was a big infighting among the editors of the Washington Post, the New York Times. We hear these stories because there are some people who want to get the truth out, but the people in control, they're dictated as to what they're supposed to do. They're following an agenda. This is the way that it works. So don't mean to go on and on about that.
Oh, you're doing fine. No, I appreciate this because people need to hear it, obviously. And, the programming, they call it programming for a reason. Television and all that other weird stuff they do, but they have their controllers and their entrainment, like we were talking about, where they have repetitive stories that go nonstop to just pull you into this false realities, and they censor it the way they want to. I mean, it's really, to me, it's very toxic to even subject myself to that type of information. I mean, I just can't even listen to it. And if I go visit a friend or something and they have mainstream on, I just can't deal with it. I just have to get out of there because it's just so noxious and so wrong and so not correct. I don't even want anything to do with it,
And there's so much stuff. This is the thing is people don't realize when you understand the big agenda, when you see the big picture, and you have studied this as long as I have, what is going on is you see that there is not a program. I mean, I for a while watched the series House, which was about most people know it went off the air a few years ago. It was a comedy about a diagnostician who did diagnosis in a large hospital, and it was very, very popular. It was one of the leading shows on television. Every episode there was disinformation. There were messages written in. When you understand what the big agenda, I'm telling you, every program you watch on TV has this stuff written in there to condition you to normalize the ideas that are being sold to us, to normalize depopulation, to normalize chemical spraying, to normalize fluoride, to normalize, and to make you a follower. This is one of the most powerful things they do. Is they condition you to not step outside the crowd. Make sure you laugh with everybody else. Make sure that you're going to be ashamed if you step out on your own and have your own ideas. And it's so funny because they make all these claims about go out and be your own person, but yet if you look at the conditioning, it's making you like everyone else.